Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video we're going to watch over a run that I did just recently, a 25 streets on Tyrannical, Storming, Sanguine, Encrypted. I thought this would be a good key to go over for YouTube because we are first of all playing Holy Priest in a high key, which is something that admittedly I'm not the best at, but I'm starting to get in the hang of things, and I wouldn't mind watching back and seeing some of the things that I might be doing wrong and things that I'm sure there's some other recent Holy Priest rerolls out there. Also, I thought doing a Streets key would be helpful as well, just because this is a newer dungeon, people are still trying to get used to it. I'll be the first to admit that both the Holy Priest play as well as maybe our route or our strategies are going to be pretty unrefined. We're still learning it too, but hopefully, you know, at least if we can show you guys how we can time a key like this, you guys can gather some information out there from your pugs. So yeah, let's get started. Streets is actually interesting because there's a pack of 3 mobs right away in the door, and the mobs, the one in the middle uses a spell called Radiant Pulse. It does a lot of damage, and you'll see on a Tyrannical key it doesn't quite do enough to kill our party. On a fortified key it definitely can, so you have to watch out for that. So first things first, you want to stand away from these mobs. Because they start as neutral, they could get threat on you pretty easily if you're just standing near them before the tank can press a button. I actually start off using Boon right away. Normally I don't use Boon as much of a healing CD, but because it works out such that the first pulse cast sort of happens as my Boon finishes, I can use it for a little bit of healing because it's predictable. So we focus down this Gate Warden guy. That mob will cast Radiant Pulse, I think roughly every like 20 seconds, and so you definitely want to burst that guy down and you don't want to get a second cast. And once we're done with him, the other 2 security mobs don't do too much, so we're just going to run ahead. The officers have a shield. They not only start with a shield, but I think they cast one as well. The custom security uses this hard light baton as well. The shields are very important to dispel as a priest or a shaman. The hard light batons you can if you have a spare global, but it's not super important, especially if your tank has a lot of strong cooldowns. So this is a pack where I may choose to pop some sort of a cooldown, whether it's him or Apotheosis here, just for a little bit of extra healing. Having everyone grouped is nice too, because we can mass dispel if we need to, but it looks like things went pretty well. On AoE pulls, it's really important that you're keeping your Divine Star on cooldown. Divine Star is going to be a huge part of your AoE damage, and it is basically uncapped AoE. So on bigger pulls of mobs, if you're trying to up the amount of damage that you're doing, it's very, very useful. I want to talk about one thing right here. So I pressed Ascended Boon. It was a little weird because it was sort of at the end of a pack. Ascended Boon has a really cool synergy with the Relic, if you're not familiar with this. It essentially reduces the cooldown of your Ascended Blast to be the same as your global cooldown, which means that you can go into Boon, and if you have this buff here, you can press Ascended Blast every single global, which is pretty solid. It does upwards of like 10 to 12k single target DPS. And also on top of that, you have everything recharging your Ascended Boon. You have your Legendary, you have the Mechanicos Soulbind, and you have the Relic. So you'll see that even though I only use it on a couple mobs, the cooldown is going to be pretty short. And I purged that shield on the officer real quick, and so the cooldown is a minute, which is actually kind of long. And maybe if I would have waited for this pack, I could have gotten a little bit more CDR from my Soulbind. I'm not sure what is the right play, but it is what it is. It's up for my next use anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. Again, every time that officer puts up that shield, I'm trying to grab it. Now notice I'm not doing like too much spot healing on the DK. When you're playing with a good blood DK, you shouldn't need to heal them too often, assuming that they have their 4-piece set up and they're pretty strongly geared and they know how to play their class. It is good to throw some heals now and then. I'd use a runic power tracker to see how much runic power our tank has, to know when he'll be able to death strike and when he won't. So the 2 things I'm watching are if his Crimson Rune Weapon, which is his main defensive in this patch, if this falls off, this is something where he might be vulnerable if he doesn't have some of these other buttons like Vamp Blood or IBF, or if he runs out of runic power. However, because I do need to keep up my flash concentration. I will get Surge of Light procs. I do like to press Prayer of Mending and some other things sometimes if I'm, you know, needing to run around or whatever. I still will throw some globals on the tank, but you'll notice that I'm spreading my Shadow Word Pain. I'm dispelling the shields. I'm not primarily focused on healing the Blood Decay. However, you know, this is a high level key with a really strong player who's also very well geared. Just because I'm not healing a Blood Decay doesn't mean that you guys can go around in your pugs and not heal your tank. If your tank is struggling, you know, we all know, as a healer, I'm sure you've played with many people of varying degrees of skill. Some Blood Decays will not be as self-sufficient as others, and try and keep an eye on that, right? You know, as a Holy Priest, you have a really strong ability to tank heal. Obviously, it's really fun to just DPS and throw out Shadow Word Pains, but if your tank is struggling, or maybe he isn't as quite geared, he doesn't have all the tier set and stuff like that, you may just be stuck being a heal bot, and that's okay. This is part of the reason too why I think popping Apotheosis is fine, is I have all this CDR. I could have popped it at some point here. And so I'm purging these shields. I do like to use Shadow Word Death as well on these low health mobs, but I'm also trying to focus my damage on the highest health guy. So here I position myself for a knock, a Shining Force, and it's you have to be careful when you're playing priest to position your Shining Forces. They can be very, very useful. However, you can also just knock mobs everywhere. So notice I took my time and kind of got into a good position before I used it. These beams on the ground hurt really, really bad, even on a tyrannical. Try and avoid them at all costs. If you're in a bad situation, you can actually jump over the beam. Just be careful. You want to clear it. You want to do like a pretty big clear. You can't, you know, if you get anywhere close to it, you're going to get clipped. And so right here, I just decided to pop Apoth on this trash. This boss is not particularly hard to heal, so another reason why you can be comfortable just popping any of your CDs here. I have Ascended Boon, but I decide to hold it for the Relic, because that's going to give me a lot of single target damage on this mini boss right here. And otherwise, just doing our DPS rotation, keeping our DPS topped a little bit here. And you can see that as soon as I get the buff, I pop Boon of the Ascended, and I'm just slamming Blast. This mob has Radiant Pulse as well, similar to the first mob in the pack, or in the dungeon rather, and so you have to watch out. This one will cast it instantly as soon as you pull the mob, so it's not like the first one where you wait around a little bit. Now, one thing about Radiant Blast is you can't actually line of sight it. So what you'll see us do, this isn't completely necessary in a Tyrant key, but you'll see I go behind the wall there when that cast goes off, just so that I don't take the damage there. It's probably not worth doing if you're, you know, like a rogue that's real, you can feign it and you have some abilities. You know, you don't want to run all the way out of melee and line of sight, but as a Holy Priest, it's something nice that you can do. So this boss is kind of boring. We're probably going to skip through a lot of this. You'll see me kill the Relic. As a healer, I think you should always try and put a global or two on the correct relic. You know, don't just get angry when your DPS don't kill the right one. Focus it down yourself. Here, I've been trying to work on some tech where I try and find a place to stand that bugs out this thing that pulls your weapon away. And haven't quite figured it out, but that's kind of what I was doing with that box there. And so now you have to be careful here. So one thing that happens as soon as the boss gets done with this containment cell thing, he pulls people's weapons. And so you'll see that I boon because I have the Relic, but if he pulls my weapon, it can be very, very sad. And there you see he does it. It basically always happens if the Relic lines up and you try and boon. So I lost some time there, but there's not really too much you can do. If you have the Relic and you have boon, you just should use it. You can see there I let my flash concentration stacks drop at the beginning of your Holy Priest time. While you're learning, you're basically used to just keeping it up 24/7. If you're in like a tough boss fight scenario or a tough pull, that would be the case. That's what you want to do. However, in a dungeon scenario, when you do care about your damage a little bit, when you're trying to speed things up, or when you get your weapon pulled from you again and you can't cast a spell to renew it, very often it's totally fine for your flash concentration to drop. I've been hearing a lot of people wanting to move away from the legendary because it kind of feels clunky or it's annoying to keep it up the whole dungeon. And the first advice I would give you is try just not worrying about it. You know, like if you need to do healing, then start pressing flash heal like you normally would to build up your stacks. And as soon as you have stacks, then just press heal, you know, and then you have that juiced heal. It at least gives you the option. It doesn't mean you have to keep it up all the time. And we lose our weapon again. This can be really annoying when your weapon spawns in other damaged areas and you have to, you may try and pre-defensive or something like that just in case, especially on a hierarchy. But yeah, anyway, so try just not keeping your flash concentration up if you feel like you don't need to. So this is a situation here where the boss is using its ability, not interrogation, but it has an ability that buffs its melee attack damage. And we also have our tank here that has Dancing Rune Weapon not available yet. Also, the tank is probably going to want to use Dancing Rune Weapon on this next pull and not waste it. So this is a time where you kind of just want to pump heals into the tank. The tank might need some help. Now, he does have Vamp Blood and some other stuff going on. This right here is not going to hurt too bad. But now you see the tank is trying to save everything. And I get my weapon pulled from me again. So a little bit of a... And you can see right there, I immediately just GS. Because I sort of recognized that I needed to be healing the tank. But I lost my flash stacks. And I also lost my weapon. I think popping Apoth here would be okay. I think using a holy word and then popping Apoth and getting it back again might be good. And it looks like I don't do that, but yeah, so you can see what my plan here. I'm just throwing heals into the tank because I know that Blood DK isn't going to want to use his Crimson Rune Weapon, and this boss actually does hit pretty hard. And this pack is very similar to the earlier packs. Not too much to talk about. One thing here is looks like we use Shroud to kind of group all the mobs together. Blood DK is, this isn't something that you will do in pugs very often, but it's cool to help out your tank a little bit. I have a weak aura there. I haven't really mentioned power infusion yet, but I have a weak aura that tracks when certain party members use cooldowns. I would definitely recommend getting one of those so that you don't have to think too much. Almost always in dungeons, it's better off to send that PI to someone else rather than using it on yourself. However, in a pinch, you can. You can see here I'm tracking that beam debuff on my frames. That way I can see if people get hit and kind of pump them with some heals. I actually get clipped by the beam and I start hemming without realizing it, sort of. And normally if you're going to hem in a situation where you're taking damage, you should pop a defensive, either like DP or fade, just to reduce the damage a little bit. And I have this buff that I'm probably going to try and use. No. So it looks like I decide not to use my boon here just because I know the whole pack's going to be dead anyway. I'm pressing Holy Nova. I'm mainly doing that because I want to move. I want to move towards the next pack, and so my only really options to DPS while moving are Chastise, Holy Nova, and Shadow Word Pain. And so sometimes on lower numbers of mobs, I'll press Holy Nova even in that situation. So in this route, we decide to go left. We've actually been going both sort of ways. I think we're still getting a feel for things. I think as long as you have organized kicks on the, I don't even know, what the core hounds or whatever, the guys from Molten Core, as long as you have kicks on those guys, going left I think is a pretty nice route. Probably easier in pugs than going right, but I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can share your experience with what direction you guys like going in this dungeon. This mini boss I think is part of the reason why going left is nice, is because you get almost 7% count for that one guy. It's a little annoying because you can't pull anything with it, but it's kind of a nice break pull. We did that big trash pull. Everyone uses cooldowns and then you just sort of kill that guy by itself. So this Ancient Dreadcast is a curse that goes on everybody. It is extremely important that that gets kicked every time. There's also some weird thing with both of these core hounds needing to die at the same time. I'll be honest, I don't know what happens if you don't kill them at the same time, but it could have been just like a sanguine or a bolstering thing or something, but every group that I've been in has killed them at the same time. So these core hounds charge, or no, the Direhorn charges towards a ranged player. And so what you can do is you can have people stand on this location, which cannot be charged to. This is tech that we saw a lot in BFA and Legion. Not too much this expansion, but we have Zyro, who's not in melee. If our Warlock there would have stood in melee, all of these Direhorn charges are going to go to either me or Yoda, and then they're going to bug out. Like if you watch this Frenzied charge right here, you see how he finishes the cast, but doesn't actually charge towards us. So if you're ever doing this pull, it's nice to have, if you're a Holy Priest, generally you stand up there, and then everyone else kind of tucks together in melee. This is a pack that is normally very, very scary. Everyone's scared of cats in dungeons, but these cats don't actually hurt too bad. You can see I just pop Boon on pull just because I know that this pack doesn't do too much damage. It takes a lot of dungeon experience to know exactly when you want to Boon, so don't stress out too much if you're playing Kyrian Holy and you feel like you're not getting full advantage of it. I mean, you'll see that even I'm not doing that much damage in this dungeon. I'm sure, you know, some other priests would be pumping a lot harder than me. So here we split up. My team runs and does like a small trash pull, and I start some of the RPs. There's actually a lot of different things that you need to do. In dungeons, we call them RP, basically just like things that you need to activate, I guess. So what I did there is I started the 2 rooms for both of the other boss wings. So I walked to the guy that opens the door to the mail room, and I also walked to the guy that starts the game that you move around the items or whatever and sell them to the vendors. And while we're doing that, our team works on trash in this area. And this is, from what I remember, usually the longest and most annoying RP. So I think that's the idea behind this route is we start the quick RPs far away, and then this one we kind of do trash while we're waiting for this. You can see that the boss actually gets pulled here. When you start this RP, I haven't quite figured out exactly how it works, but basically when you start this RP, people in the room will start talking, and then the boss will just pull no matter where you are, even if you're not in aggro range of the boss. So you kind of have to be ready to either deal with the boss or just reset it. We get the Relic from that pack just for a little bit of extra damage, but I know I'm going to want to use Boon on the boss, probably. Actually, maybe it might not have been bad there to use Boon on this pack. I might have missed a Boon use there, simply because I'm not going to want to Boon on pull because of the... because I'm going to want to wait for this Relic. So I might be holding onto my Boon for a very long time here. So this guy will grip you in. Actually, we chose to kill the Woe Drifter here. Now I remember my thought process. So the very first guy grips you in, and so if you get Vi or the relic on this boss, you have a chance for the boss to grip you in, and then just the relic will one-shot you if it grips you into the ability. So for safety reasons, we chose to just get Woe on the boss, just so we don't have to deal with that. And yeah, so that was why I held my Boon, because I was going to use the Boon on pull there for damage. So I get this, I don't know what you call it, the consumption buff, the gluttony buff that lets you soak up the orbs. So I try and go in to pass it to melee, but the first 2 iterations of that buff actually don't do anything. So you want to make sure that you get the third. These bombs do quite a bit of damage. They don't quite one-shot as long as you press like something, but as a priest you can MD 1 out of every 3 of them. So keep that in mind. Generally speaking, I'll try and MD when there's 2 melee. For instance, well, right now we don't have multiple melee because Yoda is playing Marks Hunter, but normally he's playing Survival Hunter in this dungeon. And so, for instance, if Yoda and Junkrat get it in a situation like this, it's good to MD to grab both of them. You can see I used my Holy Word there just to get Yoda to full health, just to make sure he'd live that. It wouldn't one-shot him. So the strategy we use is tanking the boss in the corner. It allows our melee DPS players to move the buff back and forth and just soak them all up. Here I dispel Yoda because he had just gotten targeted, and then I press personals myself. I use Fade for the damage reduction conduit and Desperate Prayer. Now, one thing I'm trying to be careful of is I'm trying not to get the gluttony buff. So I'm kind of watching the timer, and see I'm like hugging the far side here just to make sure that I don't get it passed to me, because your team can actually lose quite a bit of damage if you get the damage buff that's intended for, you know, people that are actually doing damage as a Holy Priest. It looks like I'm ignoring my weak aura here. and not oh, I forgot to mention too, you want to be purging this guy. I always forget about this, but the robot boss will get a buff on itself. It'll attack really fast, and I think you can't really like stop it until you purge that buff, so you have to make sure that you're quick with the purge. And now the last person that comes out, this is where we decide to lust. If you kill one of the other two really fast, you still have to wait for the next one to jump out. I don't really understand why this particular boss works like that, but it usually isn't a great idea to like pop bloodlust early or to use like a ton of cooldowns early, because you still have to wait anyway. So we decide to hold bloodlust for the third boss. Not the best use of lust, but hey, it is what it is. This whirling annihilation pulls you actually a pretty big distance. As a priest, you do have, or as a goblin priest, you do have a goblin jump if you need to, but I try and hold on to it for an emergency. And again, you can see that gluttony buff is getting passed around. Junkrat over there running in the corner, grabbing some orbs. Not too much to say about this boss. Maybe we can skip ahead a little bit. We kill the boss. Again, my flash drops, but that's okay because we're just mounting and running around. So I think there, if I remember right, I think there might be some shenanigans here. So we're trying to reset the boss, but kill one of the relics to get the mini boss for us. I don't remember if it works out this particular time. Yeah, so we pull this pack and we're fighting this pack, and then while we're doing that, we actually pull the boss out of the room and focus down a relic to get us that woe buff. I don't remember what exactly we use it for, but that's what we wanted to do. I think we end up sending Junkrat or Yoda to the merchant game is why we did this. Oh, it looks like it was initially going to be me, and then we talked about maybe me doing it wasn't a good idea, because I'm not going to be able to leave combat and I might drag some of the mobs with me, so we end up sending Junkrat. Having the woe buff to do the little merchant game is actually really helpful, and since we can kind of just get that relic for free by pulling the boss and killing it and then resetting it, it's actually really, really handy. So now we have woe buff, which doesn't do a whole lot for us. This room can be a little bit hectic, so be careful. You have the boss, which can pull at any moment. You also have these sorters, I believe, are the mobs. It's either the sorters or the workers that open these cages. If you look to my left, there's that cage with the bear or whatever in there. There's cages with chickens. Now the one at the very bottom of the screen, you can see all those chickens in there. If any of these guys open the cages, all these chickens start running everywhere and it keeps mini stunning you. It's absolutely brutal. It's like very, very terrible thing to happen. So even as just like a healer or something, you want to be watching those cages and trying to protect them, making sure it doesn't go. And now we're getting a little bit fancy, and we're trying to kill the Virune, and we're trying to do the same thing, but we don't quite have the damage for it, and we end up having an error here, and I end up running into the room. This is like a little bit of a nonsense here, but we're deciding here if we want to continue the pull or not. Luckily, the first explosion is on Yoda, so he can turtle, and I think we eventually decide to wipe, if I remember. I don't think we end up fighting like this, so we decided to just wipe here. Maybe we were getting a little bit too fancy, or maybe we just didn't have any damage. That's part of the downside to everyone's talking about the whole Destralock Hunter meta, but unfortunately, if they're out of, like, if they don't have cooldowns, which they're not going to if they're saving them for a pack, they're not going to have a lot of single target damage. You're pretty much relying on the rogue for activities like that. This is a great time to talk about the portals in the dungeon. So every time you die, you spawn at the start, and it might seem like a treacherous walk back, but there's actually this room that you fight the first boss room is a portal room where you can go to different checkpoints in the dungeon. However, in order to use those portals, you actually have to activate them. So if you see, there's this NPC right here in this portal. This is actually right outside the mailroom where we were, and you have to talk to that NPC to activate that portal. And so we sort of strategically, that's like usually a pretty good portal to get, because this is where some of the danger happens. But yeah, so make sure if you're running around, especially as a healer, it can be a good thing to do in a pug or something to open up those portals. just because you never know when you're going to need to use it. So now we do have our Vi Relic, which we can use for that buff. We also finish off some of the trash. This Male Elemental, is that what it's called? Male Elemental? It creates this little dome that gives a haste buff. The haste buff works for everybody, the mobs and you. And so one thing we do here is we keep this Male Elemental alive to give us one of these domes to give us some haste for the boss fight. However, one thing we did not calculate is it was Sanguine. And yeah, we have some problems here. The guy doesn't cast it. It happens when it dies. But there's a Sanguine puddle in here, and I'm struggling a little bit here. I'm trying to heal everybody up, but I sort of find the edge of the dome, but some of our teammates are still taking damage. I quickly just try and get a boon off here because I know my boon is going to go off during this fan mail, but I sort of panic and decide to abandon the boon. Maybe if I would have booned earlier, I wouldn't have been able to. Maybe let's watch back here because I haven't really talked about too much like fancy stuff here. So here I'm spamming heal on my party members, but I think what I should do is just boon right away. Because if I'm halfway through my boon and that fan mail mechanic starts, which just does a lot of group damage, I'm gonna need to abandon my boon. Unfortunately, there's no timer, so I don't know what this file name is, but there's no timer here to tell me when it's gonna come. So I decide to just press boon because I'm in the haste puddle, but then the haste puddle goes away, the fan mail starts, and sometimes you just have to abandon your boon, especially because my flash is gonna drop here too. And another thing that gets asked a lot is how do you AoE heal as Holy Priest? And the answer is simply you just spam single target heals. Holy Priest is just a very efficient single target healer, and with Trail of Light and a little bit of your mastery and like some of that, like you do have like Holy Word, you have Divine Hymn, you can do some AoE healing, but for the most part, if you need to pump heals, you should just be spamming heal, like spreading it out on your party. This is pretty bad for me because was supposed to be doing the boxes, but then this fan mail came out. I think this fan mail mechanic is really, really tough for Holy Priest because I believe it's physical damage, so I believe you take a whole lot of damage and it's tough for you. And it happens so frequently that you cannot use a cooldown every time. So yeah, I don't know. This is a fight where I wish I had good advice for you guys, but I really struggle with this fight on Tyrannical. This is really, really hard because you want to help with the packages, it feels like, because if you don't do some of the packages, the DPS are running around and you lose a lot of damage. The fan mail is like so frequent. It's just this crazy burst of AoE damage, and everyone runs out of personals and you run out of CDs. So yeah, I don't know. So here's this fan mail. I take a lot of damage here. Zyro also has a debuff. You can see like how much ridiculous damage people are taking. I him really quick, but I realize that my him is not going to save me, and I'm actually going to die if I just keep holding that him. So I leave him for a couple ticks, and then I GS myself, just because that mechanic actually one-shots me even with a full team soak. So you have to be really, really careful. As a Holy Priest, at least this is what I feel. You can't even use your personals, your Fade, and your DP on the fan mail because you need to use them for that soak. And I didn't have them there, so I had to GS myself. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll do a more in-depth analysis on this boss, but this boss always just feels like chaos. It's always so difficult. And part of the problem with this route is we don't have Lust for it, although it is pretty hard to have Lust lined up for this boss. And so to deal with these packages, we found a pretty good strategy is just to have the healer or a ranged DPS park by the opening one. So for instance, what I'm doing here is I'm parking by it, then people can throw the packages to me. I purposefully never move. However, in the second package collection, it stops halfway through and it moves. And so right away I see this one is over here and I throw it over. Just because it's going to go off pretty soon. And now we're just like mega danger because the fan mail is going off. And as a healer, sometimes you have to realize when your team needs to be alerted. And just watching this back, I think I realized here that, okay, I don't have GS. I'm so far away, so I can't really do that much AoE healing on myself. I was running around like we're in trouble here. So it's good to be able to communicate weird stuff like this, and this situation happens a lot in this boss, and I don't really know how to fix it too well. But utilizing your conduit resonant words as well as your tier set, just like rotating between holy words and big heals. And yeah, luckily we have a lot of damage. This is where a class like Blood Decay is insanely strong, because being able to kill this boss in 3.5 minutes is actually very, very important. And here we actually have a little bit of disagreement to whether or not we should do the packages. I don't know what cooldowns people have, so usually I just default to what my team says, and they were like, yo, throw them in, and so we start throwing them in. But generally speaking, you usually want to try and commit to this boss when you can, if it's possible, because this guy is just so nasty. So yeah, I guess it wasn't that bad. Like, watching it back, or in the moment, it felt so chaotic, like having to do like 13k HPS while running around, while worrying about getting one shot. It didn't feel that bad watching back, but yeah. All right, so I'm going to, or we're going to Shroud. And so remember, we had Junkrat do the whole game moving around the packages or whatever, so we can just run right into this room. But if you're, you know, in a less organized situation, this is where you just play the game and move the package around. Honestly, there's like almost nothing to say with this boss. I feel like this was maybe a cool idea, but I think this is probably one of their worst designed bosses. It just like does nothing the whole time, and you have to like keep using like extra action button and like jumping around and stuff. So yeah, there's not really too much more to this dungeon. The rest of it's pretty chill. Like I think I'm just gonna skip ahead. The only thing I'll say that is a somewhat helpful tip is when you play the music game and you get so many in a row, you get this buff here. I think it just gives you haste, or it might give you more. And in the last phase, when you're fighting the main boss, you can actually go back onto your instrument here and refresh this buff. You only have to do one. And then it refreshes your buff to 40 seconds. So you can see I kind of do a couple there just because why not, but it's good to watch out for your instrument to become active every time. You can also just sit on the instrument to heal. However, a lot of my weak auras and like stuff turns off when I go on vehicles. I don't really feel like I want to like change everything just for this one boss, so I guess I just don't stand on the drums. Or if you use like action bars or weak auras that don't do that, but you'll see it's nice too. You can jump on the drums for the suppression spark, so it'll stop it from pulling you in, and you can still free cast. You can see I just jump on the drums, do like 1 or 2 notes just to refresh my buff. But yeah, there's not much to say about this guy. So we kill the woe relic. If you're in a lower key, killing the woe relic there is great because it gives you a speed buff right here. You can also use this warlock gate, a really cool gate to move up here so you don't have to run around the stairs. However, in a 25 tyrannical, the boss just lives so long that you can't keep the woe buff, unfortunately. So, but in a lot of keys that you guys do, especially in fortified, you'll be able to keep that woe buff and just zoom out of here and save a lot of time. So I've seen a lot of groups do different stuff. We're trying to kill this mini boss here just because, again, he gives decent count. The strategy that people do, I don't quite understand. It's like splitting up the party. So like right here, Junkrat and Zyro get linked, and if they touch each other, I believe they blow up and it does a bunch of damage and leaves a dot. And something happens, I think storming and then a knockback, and we end up pulling extra stuff here. This is why this area is particularly dangerous, and this is why we try not to fight stuff in here. We try and fight as little as possible, but we are trying to kill this mini boss just to like experiment with the route. And as soon as we pull more trash in, we just decide it's not worth it. We have plenty of time on the clock, and we have that portal that we've activated earlier, so we just decide to run it back. And yeah. So now here we are running it back. We just get a food buff because why not? Fill up our health. So this is, I don't fully understand this. I think it might always link a melee with a range, and I'm having problems here because I'm a goblin, People in chat told me after the fact that if you stand a little bit further back, like don't hug the wall, but stand like, you know, back here a little bit, you can actually cast on the boss. But I was having difficulty casting on the boss, and then I come around the corner to cast, and I immediately get linked with Junkrat, and I just take like, you know, my whole health bar's worth of damage. So I'm struggling a little bit with this, but I want to try the stepping back method. Another thing you can do here is use a toy to change the model of your character. So for example, one of them you can just buy in the auction house is the Dark Moon fish, the Dark Moon Dagger Maw, I think it's called. No, whatever this guy is here, I don't remember what he's called, but the fish that changes you into pirate, you can use that and it makes you taller. I always have that on my goblin guys just so I can use that if necessary. But I'm as far as I know, you can do this as a goblin, and I'm trying to like finagle around and find the right spot, but I don't quite get there. But yeah, generally speaking, avoid as many of the mobs in this area as possible. Maybe if people get good at fighting these or learn some strategies, you can kill these, but I think this is an okay pull just because this mob is worth so much count. But yeah, this is like super chaotic. So the main thing, the reason we're doing what we're doing is this boss has a move called Power Kick, and it just like knocks the tank. It launches the tank really far. And so what we're doing is we're fighting it with our tanks back to the wall so that when he gets kicked, he stays in place, because otherwise you can see he would get kicked out and pull other trash. But the problem is the boss has those like weird mechanics that try and stop you from doing this. Like I think that's the point of the laser beams or whatever. So yeah, you know, again, this is another area that we're still you know, feeling around strategies a little bit, seeing what works. But that you can see that got those two guys gave us almost 8% count, which is very good. And now we're on to the last boss, So Asmi. Honestly, there probably isn't that much to talk about with this boss. We've pretty much reached the end of the commentary. I will say that I am probably going to do a little damage to the and then boon the boss. And yeah, essentially you're just always following around the tank, and everyone just sort of stays stacked together so you don't get split up. But yeah, there really isn't that much. You'll see I'll boon here. Maybe I'll even use a potion. And yeah, as you're doing the boss, you need to take the portal to go across this beam. If you touch this beam with anything, it will put a huge dot on you. I'm not sure if you can Warlock Gate it. I think Warlock Gate might give you the debuff, but I might be wrong about that. One thing you can do is you can Warlock Gate through the walls. So you'll see that Zyro placed a gateway there. He did it at the very beginning of the fight when he had line of sight, and then that gateway stays there and you can click it to go through that wall, which is very handy. And there's lots of other abilities that you can use, I think, like Blink. However, Priest does not have one of them. Yeah, but there isn't too much to say about this video. You know, this is just DPSing the boss. Unfortunately, I feel like there's quite a few bosses like this in Shadowlands which have really cool mechanics and are probably pretty fun to DPS, but when it comes to healing, it's like, doesn't really, you know, not the best designed healer fight. Yeah, it just is what it is. You know, you follow around the boss, you do the portals. So what we do here is we kick the first one quickly, and then we try and milk out the second kick as long as possible on that double technique. That's just because when the boss is casting double technique, it's just sitting there. And as long as you have trust in your teammates to do that, you can kind of milk it out and just let it go. This was, generally speaking, you should always go through the portals as fast as possible, just to make sure you get where you need to go or get there before you move. But yeah, there's not too much to talk. I guess we can wrap up this video. This was my first Holy Priest commentary. I didn't talk a whole lot about specific Holy Priest. Oh no. Okay, so looks like our question is answered there. You cannot Warlock Gate through the beam, and now I'm just stranded in the middle of no. Yeah, this is a great time to end the video. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys. I'll try and keep doing more commentaries. I do want to talk about Gambit as well, but I thought this would be a good one because we could talk about Holy Priest a little bit, and we could also talk about Streets. I tried to talk maybe a little more about Streets than I normally would in my commentaries, just because I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out this dungeon. But yeah, again, thanks for watching. Appreciate you guys, and happy keying, friends.